Welcome back, you lovely lot. I know we were meant to have this episode out last Sunday, but Em was off seeing the Westlife, and we hadn't realised we needed to have an episode ready.
Yeah, we're not always very good at the whole planning ahead thing.
I mean, we make the plans, we're just not good at carrying out the plans. So it means you get one today and one next week, rather than 2 weeks apart, so you lucky ducks. And we do need to get back on track.
Yeah, because we've scheduled episodes up until the end of this year on specific dates for specific reasons, so we kind of need to get back on track.
We know what we want to do, it's just doing it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we do digress.
Yes, this week's episode is one that I can't quite believe we've not done yet.
Me neither.
Yeah, Carrie is very much into this period of history, and the people and the myths. And I've gotten more into it recently. I'm not going to lie, since the Marvel movies came out, it has made this period of history more prevalent and more people, I think, wanting to know more the backstories. Mm-hmm. Which is why I was the one who did all the details. I did all the research for this one because I wanted to know more. But I will apologise now if it's wrong, or if Carrie needs to jump in and be like, that's wrong, that's not right. Which is completely fine, which she totally will do as well if I've got something wrong.
I mean, I won't be quite, horrible with it. But I won't be, actually... I won't be quite that bad.
Also, this is probably going to be one where I will stop talking mid-sentence and Carrie will say a word I can't say, because this week we are delving into the realm of the Viking.
I will do my best with the pronunciations, but if there are any that I get wrong, I am sorry.
I mean, you'll do better than me. You do better than me most speaking anyway.
Fair, but you do numbers.
I do numbers.
And on this week's Ridiculous Death, we find out why size doesn't matter.
So, put down your helmet, grab a horn of mead, and let's get historical. So we'll start with an overview, because I tried to figure out a way of doing the Vikings in different subsections, because there's so much.
There is so much.
And because we're not doing a specific place or a specific person or a specific raid, it was hard to pinpoint it. So this is going to be more of an overview to start with.
I think when we... later on down the line, if we do specific people, then we can, or specific times, places, events, we can delve more into them and give a bit more detail.
Yeah, which we probably will.
Yeah.
But for this is just a note of the Viking as a whole.
Okay.
So, over the course of around 250 years, seafaring Norsemen left their homes to pursue riches abroad. The era has become almost legendary and left a lasting legacy on the world. But how do you and us actually know anything about the long history of Vikings?
First things first, how do we know so much about them? It's for the same reason we know so little. Very little archaeological evidence remains from the era, and the era is known as the Dark Ages because there was just so little light shed on it. That's why the recent discoveries of Viking ship burial sites are so important. Aside from these sites and the burial mounds, rune stones are some of the few remains we must study. Also, many stories were passed down orally over the years, and whilst they're sure to have been twisted and misinterpreted to a certain extent, Icelandic scholars did write them down a few hundred years later, so whilst a lot of them are lost, there are still many that we still have, even though they've probably been altered.
Yeah, definitely. And also, like you said, they're not going to be completely 100% as they were said, but...
Yeah, and you've got things like the onset and widespreadness, is that a word?
It is now.
Of Christianity that has changed a lot of the myths.
Yeah, that goes into this. We go into that a lot. Many historians... Many historians commonly associate the term Viking to the Scandinavian term...
Vikinger.
A word for pirate. However, the term is meant to reference oversea expeditions and was used as a verb by the Scandinavian people for when men would traditionally took time out of their summers to go a Viking. So it wasn't like a noun, it was a verb.
Yeah.
Used to go a Viking. I'd like to go a Viking.
Going a Viking.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
While many would believe these expeditions entailed the raiding of monasteries and cities along the coast, many expeditions were actually with the goal of trade and enlisting as foreign mercenaries.
The Viking Age generally refers to the period from AD/CE, whichever one you use, 800, a few years after the earliest recorded raid, until the 1050s, which is a few years before the Norman conquest of England in 1066. During this time, the reach of the Scandinavian people extended to all corners of Northern.
We're doing well with the English. the Viking words, the Scandinavian, and the Norse words are going to be fine. It's the English we're going to screw up.
I think Northern is actually a Scandinavian word. Extended to all corners of Northern Europe, and many other nations found Vikings raiding their coasts. The furthest reported records of Vikings were in Baghdad for tradings of goods like fur, tusks, and seal fat.
The exact reasons for Vikings venturing out of their homeland are uncertain. Some have suggested it was due to overpopulation of their homeland, but the earliest Vikings were looking for riches, not land. In the 8th century AD, Europe was growing richer, fueling the growth of its trading centres such as
Dorestad
and
Quentovich
on the continent and
Hamwich,
now Southampton, London, Ipswich and York in England. So that's kind of like an overview of the term Viking.
Yeah.
Written when they started and all that jazz.
Who they are, when they were, where they were.
Yes. Yeah. So now we're going on to Viking people and the culture.
The Vikings came from what is now known as Scandinavia, which is Denmark, Norway and Sweden. However, they were not one race as such, rather small groups from all over the region. Also, Vikings weren't just limited to Scandinavia. Historical records indicate Finnish, Estonian and Sami Vikings as well. And Estonia still, they absolutely love their Viking heritage. Yeah. Absolutely love it.
Aside from occasional trade, they had very little to do with one another, and in fact often fought amongst themselves. But that being said, the Viking were united as a group in one circumstance: the eyes of the conquered. They came from foreign lands, were seen as uncivilised, and were not Christians. That would come later, of course.
Viking history tends to focus on the warriors, typically men. Much has been written lately about the role of women in the Viking Age, but more on that later.
The Viking men were usually farmers, traders, blacksmiths and craftsmen, and for many would go a Viking only part-time. When a Viking wasn't busy farming, planting crops for instance, they left their farms and went raiding. They often returned in time for harvest in the fall, or autumn in the UK. Raiding was very profitable, however, and many farmers became full-time pirates and raiders.
A variety of sources illuminate the culture, the activities and beliefs of Vikings. Although they were generally a non-literate culture that produced no literary legacy, they did have an alphabet and described themselves and their world on runestones.
The Norse of the Viking Age could read and write and used a non-standardised alphabet called Runa.
Yeah, Runa.
This was built upon sound values. While there are few remains of runic writing on paper from the Viking era, thousands of stones with runic inscriptions have been found where Vikings lived. They were usually in memory of the dead, though, and not necessarily placed at graves. The use of runa survived into the 15th century, used in parallel with the Latin alphabet.
You want to know something cool?
Always.
Not Carrie's random fact, but something cool.
Cool.
We have the alphabet, which is named after the first two letters, alpha and beta, alphabet.
Did not know that even, that's cool.
They've got different systems of runes, but one of them is called Futhark, which is named after the first two runes in it.
That's fun.
Yeah.
I like that. That's cool.
The runestones are The runestones are unevenly distributed in Scandinavia. Denmark has 250 runestones, Norway has 50, whilst Iceland has none. Sweden has as many between 1,700 and 2,500, depending on definition. The Swedish district of Uppland has the highest concentration with as many as 1,196 inscriptions in stone, whereas Södermanland is second with 391.
That's a big drop. It's second, but that's a massive drop.
It is a big drop. I mean, yes, stones can get weathered and destroyed over time and people can use them in buildings, but, 1,196, 391.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are a few things to keep in mind as we tell you about Viking weapons and armour. First, 3 adult male Vikings were always armed. They hung their weapons up by their beds at night within easy reach. In an honour-based society such as the Vikings, men stood ready to defend their honour and good name at any moment. Feuds and duels were a fact of life in Viking times.
And feuds and duels could go on for generations.
Yeah.
Genuinely, it would be like if I killed you, then your kid could kill me, or Ben could kill me, and then your sister could, and then my brother's child could kill your brother's child, and just on and on and on and on.
And 100 years down the line, my great-great-great-great-grandkid would still be avenging the death of his great-great-great-great-great-grandmother's son.
But they would never actually know why.
Nope.
Yeah, it would be completely forgotten. But yeah, that's the way it works. You pay a blood price, or you would pay like a weregild, which is it's a Saxon thing as well, where you would pay a price to the family for the person you've killed. The family might not accept that and then just turn around and beat you up.
Cool.
Yeah.
Fun.
But the option was there. That's the main thing. Because iron was hard to dig out of the ground, weapons could be costly. Only the richest Vikings would own the complete set of available weaponry, which is a sword, a seax, or a short sword, axe, spear, bow and arrows, shield, helmet and chainmail. Poorer Vikings would carry an axe or a spear and a shield. Even the poorest Vikings had access to the axe that he used at the farm.
So everyone had a weapon of some description?
Yeah.
Apart from women, children and slaves in general, they did not carry weapons. Although free women and children carried knives they used in farm work. And Vikings did have slaves. Obviously, that's not cool. It's not okay. Never was, never will be, but it happened.
Yeah.
So we do need to discuss that. And slaves were prohibited from carrying weapons of any type.
Viking slaves are called thralls. So if you are enthralled to someone, you are enslaved to them, and that's where we get the word from. And that's where, like, enthralled.
You've got loads of random little facts you can be adding into this.
I do, I'm sorry.
So we're just going to have a whole episode of Carrie's random facts. I love it. Don't apologise, it's great.
I do actually have a very specific random fact for later, though.
Oh, excited.
The most expensive weapon was the sword, as it took the most iron to make. Rich men owned swords, the most prestigious weapon. Swords were double-edged and about 35 inches long. Most were pattern welded, which means wrought iron strips and steel were twisted together and then hammered into a blade with a hardened edge. And if you look at them, it looks cool because it looks like there's like waves of steel and everything in it.
That's fun.
Swords were often highly decorated, and many had names such as Blood Hungry or Leg Biter. Vikings carried their swords in scabbards worn over the shoulder and always accessible to the right hand. I mean, swords were that expensive that they would be passed down through family.
What would you name your sword?
The fucking.
Wow. Okay. I don't want to be anywhere near you when you're ready to kill.
No, I don't know. I genuinely don't know what I'd name it. It would be named either for great deeds or for something that's done, like Leg Biter, for example. When they'd fight, they would have a shield wall. And it was a Saxon thing as well, you'd have a shield wall. But the shields only went so far, so your best thing to do would be to hack underneath, hack the legs out.
This reminds me of like Hostel when they cut the back of the tendon.
Yeah, not cool. Which is probably why you got Leg Biter, because that person thought, hang on a second, I'm going for the legs.
Yeah.
Which is a good way to get rid of Saxons and Steve Rogers. Tiny shield, go for the legs.
Aww.
Sorry.
More Viking men carried axes or spears. Battle axes had long handles, were light, well balanced and deadly. Battle axes had a variety of head shapes with a cutting edge from 3 to 6 inches. Later, axe heads were much larger, from 9 to 18 inches long. The long handle allowed the warrior a long reach in a fight. Axe heads, as well as swords, were highly and richly decorated. The Mammon axe, dated to 1971, even had gold and silver inlay. So not only was this axe used, and swords and stuff, used to protect, they were symbols of status, so they was like very pretty.
Yeah,
so what was it? Your fuckerator?
My fucking.
Your fucking would be very pretty.
It would. It would have a nice little rivulets and a good guard. Although, you know, the typical swords that you see, like your medieval swords that had the big cross guard to guard your fingers. The Viking swords didn't necessarily have that. They had a guard to stop you from slipping your hand down the blade. But if someone then wanted to just slice across and hack your fingers, they kind of could.
Ouch.
Yeah, it wasn't massively practical, but then again, you also didn't get yourself caught up on like massive crossguards. But some of them were jeweled, and if you ever get a chance to have a look, I think you can do it online, but you can see pommel guards and pommel stones and everything from like the Sutton Hoo Hoard, and they're gold inlaid with engraved garnet, and oh my god, they are beautiful.
I bet.
Beautiful. Yeah, spears, probably the most common weapon.
Yeah.
Taking the least amount of iron to make, they could be thrown or used to thrust at the enemy. If you want a good example of like how a spear is used in that kind of context, if you watch, and not for the faint of heart, the battle between the Mountain and Oberyn Martell in Game of Thrones. It doesn't end well, but you see how he uses a spear, and it's kind of like a a slap and a thrust and a throw sort of thing. Spearheads came in a variety of shapes and sizes, from long and thin to spearheads with wing shape near the shaft. So then if they just kind of stabbed in and you pulled them out, they'd pull more out with them. Spearheads were also made of iron, and many were decorated. Bows and arrows were also used in battle, and you could get different like bow tips, again exactly like arrow tips, exactly the same, to pierce armour. And yeah,
very cool. So that's like culture, people, armour, stuffs. So now we're going on to the ships. And obviously, I think everyone has seen the dragon-headed Viking ships that are depicted in all of
the most iconic image, isn't it?
So we're going to talk about ships. But before we begin discussing the actual Viking Age, we should first discuss, like we said, the ships. And this was the first thing that any unsuspecting country would see.
These extraordinary vessels, longships in particular, or their original name, brace yourself for this, langskip. I know, right?
Wow.
Shaped the lives of seafaring Norse and changed the course of European history.
Honed for more than 10 centuries, the shipbuilding skills of the North led to a variety of vessels, from small fishing boats, big-belled cargo ship vessels, to the famous, like you said, lightning-fast longships used for raiding. But no matter the size, most of the ships were designed to be narrow in shape with short drafts, and drafts are vertical distance between the waterline and the bottom of the ship. Features that gave them highly adaptable for use in the oceans and rivers.
Yeah, if they were shallow, they could skim across the water quicker.
Yeah.
And even if they were wider, they could still carry heavy loads without sinking too deep. So they could go down rivers and not skim along the bed. The Viking shipbuilding craft reached a high point in the 7th century when they invented the keel, which is a structural beam that runs from the bow to the stern and sits lower than the main body of the ship. So you've got like the side of the ship and then that long beam that comes down the middle, and the ship comes up, that's your keel. This feature increased speed and stability and prevented unwanted lateral movement. The keel, along with the addition of a large mast and sail, would ultimately allow the Norsemen to make long journeys across the North Atlantic. These vessels are now looked back upon as revolutionary in design and a technological miracle.
They need to, because that's still basically the premise of building a boat nowadays. You have a bow, stern, and a keel.
Yep, it's still used now. And if you look a little bit further back at the likes of like your Greek and Roman triremes and things, it was mostly like a flat base. There was no keel under there.
No.
So they could travel with oars and sails, but they were still quite cumbersome. These ones just skimmed across the water.
Yeah, almost like, when you like skim a stone?
Yeah.
Kind of just going along the top.
Yeah.
To begin the shipbuilding process, however, the Vikings would drive wedges into freshly cut trees until the wood split along the grain. Up to 20 great oaks might be cut down for one ship. The wood was shaped and arranged so that the planks fit together perfectly in like a clinker construction, overlapping like a fan.
Mm-hmm.
The ship was coated with a watertight mixture of tar-soaked animal hair, wool or moss, and stabilised with iron rivets. The end result was an incredibly fast and flexible longship that nothing could catch.
I think that's really clever, using like one single plank all the way across.
Yeah.
That clinker design meant that no water could get through,
Mm-hmm.
and that, because the wood would naturally bend as it moved, and if the wood then warped, the whole thing would warp with it, so it would be flexible, and you wouldn't get that resistance as soon as you hit the water. It would move with it.
But they did all that, and they didn't have like machines or anything. They cut down 20 trees, and like massive oak trees, and cut them into pieces and made boats, and they literally had like the basic of weapons.
And think of like all the mathematics and calculations and everything involved.
So
they
cool.
wouldn't have the computer power that we have now. It would be brain power. The men rowed with a series of oars, accompanied with a large sail, most likely made of wood. Not wood, wool. A wood sail.
You don't want a sail made of wood.
No, wool. I put a D where a D should not be. Rather than a rudder, the long ships had a steerboard fastened to the right-hand side of the ship at the stern, so they could turn it. Yeah. But if with the oars, even if they were out at sea, if they then got becalmed, they could just keep going.
Yeah. By the middle of the 9th century, the raids really picked up as word spread across the Norse region of Europe's removable wealth. Norse villages and communities came together to build ships with the intention of improving their lives through the business of raiding. In 1842, Vikings ruthlessly...
You've added 1,000 years on. I mean, it would be cool, but slightly terrifying if we had Vikings with guns.
In 842, Vikings ruthlessly attacked Nantes people on the French coast. And because of their ability to manoeuvre up rivers, they went on to raid towns as far inland as Paris, Limoges, Orleans, Tours, and
Nimes.
Nimes.
The Vikings paid as much attention to arts as they did to craft. The longships were usually adorned with carved dragon heads at the bow, which were believed to keep evil spirits away. The dragon head, coupled with a large square red striped sail, would come to be known as the signature of the Vikings. The sight would strike fear into the hearts of Europeans for 3 centuries.
To be fair, if you know that if it gets passed down that when you see this thing, you're basically going to die, or you're going to lose all your stuff, and then you saw that thing, you would shit yourself. Imagine
being just a casual Englishman, just out early morning, you're catching some fish for your breakfast, it's kind of foggy, a little bit misty in the river, and you can just hear the lapping of the water, and then in the distance you just hear a swish, like a rhythmic swish, swish, and then you turn, and out of the mist comes this like dragon or stag or other beast head moving forward, and then this whole ship comes along, and you're just like, oh no. But they were quite clever with it, because the heads were actually removable. So if they took the head on the prow down, they were there to trade. If it was up, they were there to attack.
That's fun.
So you'd want to not see that.
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not. So that's the ships. They're quite cool. Very clever. Unreally clever.
So yeah, it's insane, and it allowed them to do so much and travel so far, including like further than people possibly thought they ever did.
Yep.
But we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
And so we've got the time, we've got the people, we've got the method of transportation.
Mm-hmm.
So everything's ready to go raid.
Yes. So when did the Viking Age start in basically England? Because they hated us specifically.
You say they hated us. They kind of integrated into us. It was a weird.
But they also hated us for a while.
Yeah.
How did that all start, Carrie?
When the quiet monks on the holy island of Lindisfarne saw the dragon ships approaching, they did not know what was coming. They were fully unprepared for the ferocity of the warriors armed with sword, axe, and shield. The attack and plunder of Lindisfarne, a rich and unprotected monastery, echoed throughout the next 300 years of European history. The Viking Age had begun.
While it seems unlikely to have actually been the very first raid, it was documented in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, personal letters, and the infamous Doomsday Stone. So it was like the first one that was written down.
Yeah, it was like, that's kind of like the equivalent of the shot heard around the world. That was the moment everyone was like, oh no!
Yeah. As they're the first written sources referencing the raid, it is typically taken to be the beginning of the era.
Yeah, so that's the tipping point. The location was a well-known abbey of learning, famous throughout the continent for knowledgeable monks and its extensive library. And it's just as an FYI, it's off the northeast coast of England.
Yep.
During this raid, monks were killed, thrown into the sea, as you do, yeet, or taken as slaves. Sorry,
yeet a monk.
Didn't our D&D party do that at one point? Yeet a monk down a well.
Probably, it wasn't me.
We're Vikings. Monks were killed, they were thrown into the sea or taken as slaves, along with many treasures of the church, and the library itself was razed. This single event set the stage for how Vikings would be perceived throughout the Viking Age as savage warriors with no respect for religion or appreciation for learning.
I mean, you can kind of see why people thought that, because they took this place that was well known throughout the whole of Europe as being this amazing, knowledgeable library, and the first thing the Vikings do is basically burn it to the ground.
Yeah, and it's like, you don't attack monks, you don't attack the people closest to God, and they're like, watch me.
Yep. Despite written sources, archaeological evidence for the raid has been quite thin. The exact location of the original wooden monastery isn't known. The visible ruins on Lindisfarne today are from a later priory. However, archaeologists recently discovered a board game piece preserved in the ditch.
There's because it's technically still, I don't know if it's consecrated still, but because it is still kind of like holy ground and everything, there's some you have to jump through hoops to get permits to dig there. Yeah. Experts believe it could be from a variant of the Viking board game Hnefatafl, which I have. I've never played it, but I have it.
You just said that so easy, but it doesn't sound anything like it's spelled.
It's spelled Hnefatafl. Hnefatafl.
Hnefatafl.
Yep.
I'm going to say that word forever. Hnefatafl.
I want to... You said it like nipple tassel. But I do want to play it, but the problem is, there's no actual surviving rules, so no one entirely knows how to play it. There's just kind of guesswork. So yeah, it's also
a game without rules. Sounds fun.
Yeah. It's also known as the King's Table, which is probably easier to say than Niffeltaffel.
Nipple-tassel.
It bears some similarities to chess. The strategic board game simulates a Viking raid. It's hard not to imagine the warriors playing the game during their days at sea.
Or using it as like a, this is how we should raid.
Yeah, like
little pieces.
Same as people did use with chess. It's like a tactics sort of lesson.
Risk.
Yeah.
Archaeologists don't know if the piece was dropped by a Viking raider or owned by a local, but they can draw some conclusions based on its high quality and the dating of the ditch to be around the time of the raid.
Just 2 years later, they struck undefended island monasteries in the Hebrides and Northern Ireland. 4 more years on, and continental Europe was hit. The island monastery of St Philibert's on Noirmoutier, near the estuary of the Loire River, was targeted in 799. So when I hear Loire, all I want to say is Loire Valley, and my brain went there. I was like, well, no, river.
For several decades, the Vikings confined themselves to hit-and-run raids against coastal targets in the British Isles, particularly Ireland and Europe. The training centre of Dorstad, 80 kilometres from the North Sea, became a frequent target after 1830.
You did it again.
What?
You said 1830.
Oh, for Christ's sake! 830!
But if you think, like, the way their ships were made and the speed of them, they could raid, leg it back, and literally just glide out into the water before the English could even scramble their troops. So it was
devastating.
Soggy guerrilla warfare at the best. They then took advantage of internal conflicts in Europe to extend their activity further inland. After the death of Louis the Pious, Emperor of Francia, which is modern-day France and Germany, in 840, his son Lothar actually invited the support of a Viking fleet in a power struggle with brothers. Before long, other Vikings realised that Frankish rulers were willing to pay them rich sums to prevent them from attacking their subjects, making Francia an irresistible target for further Viking activity.
In the wave of Viking attacks in England after 851, only one kingdom, Wessex, was able to successfully resist. Viking armies, mostly the Danish, conquered East Anglia, where we live.
Ooh.
I remember how excited you got playing Valhalla Rising and you were in East Anglia.
I went through Thiotford Forest, I'm like, it's Deptford!
And Northumberland, and dismantled Mercia, which is where you're from.
Yep.
While in 871, King Alfred the Great of Wessex became the only king to decisively defeat a Danish army in England.
Sorry, Alfred is one of my historical bays.
Okay.
I'm going to blow your mind with something now.
Oh.
Wessex, Sussex, and Essex, and Middlesex are named for the West Saxons, the East Saxons, the South Saxons, and the Middle Kingdom Saxons.
That's cool.
And Norfolk and Suffolk are named after the folk of the north of East Anglia and the folk of the south of East Anglia.
So we are the north of East Anglian folk.
Yep, you're the North folk.
Well, I am the Norfolk.
Yep.
Which sounds better than Norfolk, because it sounds like we're swearing.
Norfolk and good.
Yeah, Norfolk and good. That's great.
Yep.
But again, when we're talking about Vikings, Carrie, I don't know if, because obviously you've moved down here, you've been here a while now. That sounded like it was horrible. We've been here forever. You've been here You've been here many a year now, almost a decade, which is crazy. We need to celebrate that.
We do.
But anyway, I digress. A lot of the things we talk about on this podcast have links to where we live.
Yeah.
To King's Lynn and to Norfolk. I don't think I ever appreciated, because we've done, obviously, the Richard III and Edward IV came here. King John, the Magna Carta dude, died here. Now Vikings were in East Anglia.
Vikings stay in East Anglia as well, and one of the only people to ever share a coin with Alfred the Great was the King of East Anglia,
right?
Athelstan, formerly Guthrum, who was Alfred's godson. And along the Broads, there's a specific area of the Broads, and I can't remember, and it was a story my dad told me because he used to work on the Norfolk Broads when he was a teenager here. There is an area of the Broads where there's a bridge nearby, and on certain misty nights you can look out and see the ghost of a Viking longship go across.
I've heard that.
Amazing.
Isn't it though? Like, honestly, I think we appreciate it now,
We didn't appreciate it growing up.
But so many times am I researching stuff for this podcast and I
moving.
see East Anglia or King's Lynn or Norfolk, and it blows my mind.
The thing is, it's such a huge area, but historically it's massive. There's so much impact that this place had, and I did get so excited playing Valhalla, and there is a part of it where you have to do a quest with bandits on a little island, and that island would be in the mouth of the River Ouse into the Wash, and just a little bit south of that would be King's Lynn. And just the historical significance. I remember when you lost your tiny mind when King's Lynn was mentioned in the Tudors.
Yep.
Or
Bishop's Lynn, just before. Lynn. Yeah, because it was about Henry VIII changed it to King's Lynn.
Yeah, good.
My whole town's name was changed by Henry the freaking VIII.
Yeah.
That's how. And the Duke of Norfolk was like the second to the king in importance and rank in the country.
Yeah.
For a while.
It's just. It's so cool, and it's such a powerful country, such a powerful part of the country.
Yeah.
And like the farming, the fishing, everything. It's one of those things where you should say it's more powerful than it has any right to be, but it has such a right to be.
Yeah. And
the history is so rich here, and so many people just go on about their lives and they don't even notice. No. And it's like, just look up, guys.
But with that important, we almost got, because you know when William and Kate got married, it was either were they going to be the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge or the Duke and Duchess of Norfolk.
Yeah.
And they got Cambridge, which is stupid because they lived most of their life in Norfolk and Amner. But
Kate
anyway.
Middleton shops at the range just like 10 minutes down the road from us.
Yep, we've been in there.
Yeah.
Just going to the range.
But
we've digressed. But yeah, as I said, it just makes me crazy that so much of history has some sort of start or some sort of way through where we live.
Honestly, because I really hope, and I'm sorry to kind of segue this in, but I really hope we can do an episode on the Great Heathen Army and the Great Summer Army, and you'll see just how important Norfolk is to all of that as a landing place and as the evolution of a saint.
Craziness.
Yep.
Craziness.
So,
but we're going to leave Wessex.
We're going to leave Wessex. We'll come back to Wessex at some point, hopefully. The Danes settled in the north in an area known as the Danelaw. Many of them became farmers and traders and established York as a leading mercantile city. So it's a city, a place of trade. There's a lot of archaeological evidence in a place called Coppergate in York, and that's where they have the Jorvik Viking Centre, Jorvik being the Viking name for York. Mm-hmm. In the first half of the 10th century, English armies led by the descendants of Alfred of Wessex began reconquering Scandinavian areas of England. The last Scandinavian king, Eric Bloodaxe, awesome name.
What a name.
Was expelled and killed around 952, permanently uniting England into one kingdom.
Yep. After a period of prosperity for the Vikings in West Francia, King Charles the Bold began increasing his defences, as towns, abbeys and rivers were fortified from around 862, saying it slowly so I don't keep saying 18.
Okay.
The Vikings, principally from Denmark, turned their attention back to the British Isles.
Guess who's back? Back again. Sorry.
Stop apologising.
3 Icelandic sagas tell of an army that invaded England in 866, led by the sons of Ragnar Lothbrok. They wanted to take revenge against King Ella of Northumbria, who is said to have captured and executed Ragnar. Thanks in part to the recent TV series Vikings, Ragnar Lothbrok is one of the most famous Viking figures, played as a blinder by Travis Fimmel, with the most beautiful eyes. However, many historians consider the stories and even his very existence dubious. Some think Ragnar is actually an amalgamation of several people, which makes sense.
Yeah.
As
raids became more numerous, Vikings started to create settlements. They gained control of many Scottish islands, including Shetland, Orkney and the Hebrides, along with parts of the mainland.
Ireland saw the founding of trading towns, including Dublin, Waterford and Limerick. From these bases, the Norsemen launched attacks elsewhere in Ireland and across the Irish Sea to England.
Vikings set up colonies on the west coast of Greenland during the 10th century. Sagas tell of journeys they undertook from these Greenland colonies to the New World. They mention places such as named
Helluland,
widely believed to be Baffin Island,
Markland,
widely believed to be Labrador,
and Vinland.
And more mysterious locations, which some archaeologists believe could be Newfoundland.
At present, the only confirmed Viking site in the New World is located at Lance-aux-Meadows on the northern tip of Newfoundland. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Cool. That site was excavated in the 1960s.
Wait. Did you just ask me if you said something right?
Yeah, but you like are obsessed with Welcome to the Rock.
Yeah, from Come From Away. So yeah, Newfoundland.
So
yeah. I'll let you off
that's
then.
the name of the song, isn't it? Come From Away is the musical, right?
It's fine.
Additionally, there are 3 possible Viking sites that archaeologists have recently excavated in Canada. 2 of the possible sites are located in Newfoundland, whilst a third site is located on Baffin Island in the Canadian Arctic.
That's quite far.
It is.
It takes us 10 hours to fly. Well, it takes me to fly from England to Vancouver 10 hours. That's on an airplane. That would have took a hell of a long time in a boat, even if it is a fast one.
The belief is that they were looking for a new world, and they may have been trying to sail to Iceland or Greenland and just slightly overshot.
Slightly. To Canada.
Yeah.
One possible
Canada.
Viking site is located at Point Rosie? in southern Newfoundland. At the site, archaeologists found a possible bog iron roasting hearth beside a structure made from turf. That was a mouthful. Turf. Another possible Viking site is located in Sop Arms in Newfoundland and includes a series of pitfalls that would have been used to trap large animals such as caribou. These pitfalls are arranged in a straight line, and archaeologists believed that the Vikings could have driven the animals towards these pitfalls and where the animals could have been trapped and killed. At the third possible Viking site, located at Nanook on Biffin Island, researchers found artefacts that may have been used in metal production and the remains of a structure that may have been built by the Vikings.
So not only were they settling, like they were hunting there, they were actually settling there. They were creating hearths, they were creating smithies and ironworks. So that's evidence potentially of culture. So maybe if they extended that around, what else could they find, depending on the soil there and the preservation? The mid-10th century reign of Harald Bluetooth as king of a newly unified, powerful and Christianised Denmark marked the beginning of a second Viking Age. Large-scale raids, often organised by royal leaders, hit the coasts of Europe and especially England, where the line of kings descended from Alfred the Great was faltering. Harold's rebellious son, Svein Forkbeard, led Viking raids on England beginning in 991 and conquered the entire kingdom in 1013, sending King Ethelred into exile. Svein died the following year, leaving his son Knut, or Canute, to rule a Scandinavian empire comprising England, Denmark and Norway on the North Sea. Svein Forkbeard. Swansea was named after Svein Forkbeard. Svein's Land by the Sea.
Cool. My brain starts singing the horrible history song. Swansea named of our King Sweyn. I can't not. That's why I just looked at you and you were like, you need to talk. We're on a podcast. People cannot see that you're looking at me.
People cannot see your face.
Yeah, I don't know about you from school, but when we had a couple of lessons on the Vikings, it started with King Canute.
We only did one lesson on the Vikings because they were dirty heathens.
You went to a terrible school.
I went to a Catholic school, like I said. But it was all about like the long ships, and they wore horn helmets, and they were vile, and they would rape and pillage.
We did that as well, but we started with King Canute, and then he died, and then it went to the fight between the 4: Harold Godwinson, Harald Hardrada, William the Conqueror, and the other one everyone forgets. Anyway, back in Norway, King Haakon the Good attempted to spread Christianity after his upbringing in England. However, his efforts were met with resistance. The subsequent King Harold Greycloak made his mark by destroying pagan temples, but also had little success in introducing the new faith.
You might notice, by the way, that some of them have either like cool names or they're named something son or something daughter, because surnames weren't really a thing until after the Black Death in the 1300s. So you were called by either your father's name, if you were like something son or something daughter, or by something cool that you'd done.
Yep.
Things began to change during.
So the dude was Greycloak.
Yeah, so he was probably
He just owned a cloak that was grey.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. I'll tell you later why Lothbrok was called Lothbrok.
Cool.
Things began to change during the short reign of Olaf Tryggvason. His aggressive conversion strategy, which was more burning of pagan temples and killing of resistors, so it's like convert or kill, was more effective and succeeded in making the country
Shocking
Christian.
that was effective.
Oh yeah.
Convert or kill.
Yeah, it's like, well, you're either Christian or you're dead. It was it made the country Christian at least in name. Following Tryggvason's death in the year 1000, nice round number there, Norway did revert back for a short time, but that didn't last long.
King Olaf Haraldsson came to power in 1015 and was a big
proponent
of the new faith. After his death, Olaf Haraldsson became Saint Olaf, an act that sealed the dominance of Christianity in Norway.
Yeah, it's Olaf Haraldsson that was responsible for London Bridge, or partly responsible for London Bridge coming down. Yeah.
Didn't know that.
After Canute's death, his two sons succeeded him, but both were dead by 1042, and Edward the Confessor, son of the previous non-Danish king, returned from exile and regained the English throne from the Danes. Upon his death, without heirs, in 1066, Harold Godwinson, the son of Earl's most powerful noble, Godwin, laid claim to the throne. Harold's army was able to defeat an invasion led by the last great Viking king, Harald Hardrada, or hard fighter, of Norway at Stamford Bridge near York, but fell to the forces of William, the Duke of Normandy, himself a descendant of Scandinavian settlers in northern France. Irony. Just weeks later. Crowned King of England on Christmas Day in 1066, William managed to retain the crown against further Danish challengers.
These events in England effectively marked the end of the Viking Age, but by that time all of the Scandinavian kingdoms were Christian, and what remained of Viking culture was being absorbed into the culture of Christian Europe. Today, signs of Viking legacy can be found mostly in Scandinavian origins and some vocabulary and place names in the areas in which they had settled, including northern England, Scotland, and in Russia. In Iceland, the Vikings left an extensive body of literature, the Icelandic sagas, in which they celebrated the greatest victories of their glorious past.
If you ever want an introduction into the myths, there's Icelandic sagas. There's one called the Old Edda, or the Ancient Edda, and then there's the Prose and the Poetic Eddas, the latter two written by Snorri Sturluson, and they're like the most comprehensive version of the myths that you can find, and they're the ones that a lot of later retellings are based on. But take it with a pinch of salt, because by that point Snorri Sturluson was Christian, so there is a lot of Christian influence.
Yeah. So that's the Viking Age. That's probably the longest part of the podcast, because obviously the Viking Age, we needed to chat about the Viking Age.
It was a big age.
It was big.
Yeah. But what about the women?
Now, women in the Viking Age actually enjoyed more equality and freedom than almost all other women of that time, and possibly more than a lot of women have nowadays, from warriors to farmers.
Within the male-dominated Viking society, women had a certain amount of personal power, depending on their social status. When Viking men were away from home, women in Viking society took over all the men's work as well as doing their own. Women were valuable members of the society, and it was shameful for a man to harm a woman. Take note of that, guys. Shameful.
Shame.
Beautiful.
Legends of the Valkyries and sagas telling of shield maidens have long been doubted by experts. However, in 2017, a DNA study of a Viking warrior grave, thought to be a male warrior since 1889, the human remains were proven to be female. The study concluded that the items buried with the woman proved that she was a high-ranking warrior.
One of the items was a strategic board game related to chess.
Like the one we discussed earlier.
Yep. Researchers thought of this as evidence of her strategic thinking, as such games were usually only found in warrior graves.
A woman's role was domestic. She was thought to be taking care of the family, etc., etc. And they married rather young, as early as 12. By the age of 20, virtually all men and women were married. Life expectancy was about 50 years. Most died long before reaching 50, with only a very few living to 60.
Women in Viking society had more power than most other European women of the time. They could divorce their husbands, own some property, and sell their own handicrafts, and some women became wealthy landowners.
So women in Vikingness had such a better time than a lot of women do in the 21st century.
Well, would you like a little insert of Carrie's random facts?
I do.
Because it relates to women in the Viking era.
Okay then.
Carrie's
random facts.
Women were often given the task of doing the mathematics and the money in the household because it was seen as magic. And women there was a certain type of magic called Seidr magic, which was the domain only of women. Only women could do this magic, and Odin. But that's tricky. If a man tried to do that magic, he was called which means unmanly. It was
Oh,
not
it was
that
feminine.
it was feminine. So it wasn't like a homosexual slight or anything. It was just that he was not as manly as he should have been, because he just saw, he did.
I just did that.
Did you
I
flick
just
a
flicked
spider? I'm so proud of you.
I'd let a spider touch my nail.
You just embraced your own Sailor magic.
I did. It was in the middle of us
You're powerful.
podcasting, and we were both staring at it, and one of us had to make the decision, and if you'd flicked it, it would have been near me.
I'm proud of you. You were very brave. There was also women sorceresses and seers were called, and I know you're going to laugh at this, but it's called a vulva. Yep. And they would get the seat of honour in a household. If they visited your house, you gave them the seat of honour. If you sighted them, you were cursed. It was a stupid thing to do. Do not do it.
Well,
And also, women would stop arguments in a family by throwing clothes at the men, and the men would have to stop and fold the clothes, otherwise face the woman's wrath.
I'd love to do that.
Yep. And one of the reasons a woman could divorce a man was by being unmanly. And it could literally be anything as like, he took a little bit of interest in magic, or he combed his hair too much one day and she's like, a little bit air, so yeah, I'm going to divorce you.
Bye.
Yeah. There you go. Do.
Carrie's random facts. Cool. So all of that seems quite standard.
Yes.
And they seem quite cool men, quite high cool. They were very clever, very smart. But then you think about and you discuss the Norse mythology and things that they believed in.
Considering everyone thinks they're such this violent, coarse, gross race, they have such a rich and wonderfully weird mythology.
Yeah, so in the world of Norse mythology, we find gods and goddesses, giants, strange and powerful creatures, elves, dwarves, and land spirits.
And they are still believed in to this day in
Yep.
some areas. The centre of the Vikings' cosmos is the... Cosmos?
Oh,
Cosmos?
good luck with this, Carrie.
Is the Ashri Yggdrasil, growing out of the Well of Urd. Yggdrasil holds the 9 worlds, which are the homes of the gods, man and all spiritual beings. The gods live in Asgard and Vanaheim, and the humans inhabit Midgard, also known as Middle-earth for Tolkien fans. Giants live in Jotunheim, elves live in Elfheim, and there's dwarves in Svartalfheim, which literally means dark elf home, because dwarves were also kind of interchangeably dark elves. Another is the primordial world of ice, Niflheim, while Muspelheim is the world of fire. The last world comprises Hel, with one L, the land of the dead ruled by the goddess Hel.
You deserve that for all those words you just said.
Thank you.
But also, a lot of them, you Marvel fans, will recognise. Obviously, Asgard, Jotunheim.
Yep. Muspelheim is where Surtur lives.
Yep.
And Hel is not Loki's sister, she's his daughter.
Yeah.
And she's actually quite terrifying, but also incredibly wise and like quite a cool character. But she's half beautiful woman, half rotting corpse.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So the gods and goddesses venerated from Vikings are Odin,
Mhm.
Thor,
Mhm.
Loki, Balder,
Yep.
Frigg, Freya, Freyr, and Jorda.
Nice.
There are many other gods and goddesses in the North pantheon, but these receive primary attention in the sagas and Eddas. Eddies?
Eddas, yeah.
Hey.
So should we talk about like the main players?
Yes.
So Odin, the Allfather, the one-eyed seeker of wisdom.
Not gonna lie, you say Odin, I do picture Anthony Head. Who's he played by?
Anthony Hopkins.
That's the one.
Although I think that Anthony Head would actually do it really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You knew who I meant. Anthony Hopkins. I
Well,
picture him sat on that rock.
It is that
Near
kind
my
of...
sons.
It's that kind of look, that kind of... He's supposed to be an incredibly muscular, incredibly hench guy, but also with a dark beard, and he's knowledgeable, and he's also... Yeah, he's the one-eyed seeker of wisdom, god of magic, war and runes. He hung himself on Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights to find wisdom as a sacrifice from himself to himself, recognising himself as the highest power.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, he discovered the runes, the magic runes. Now, 9 is a sacred number to the Norse. So he found 9 runes and then 9 more, so there's 18 in total.
Cool.
And he brought those runes to mankind, and he used them to practice magic, and that's how you can create runes as magic as well as a writing. True.
Fun. Thor. Chris Hemsworth. Thor with his magic hammer Mjolnir.
Meow meow. Oh, the Marvel references are going to be many. I'm sorry.
Thor with his magic hammer Jonathan. Sorry, we'll be serious now. It's actually called Mjolnir. Protects mankind and his realm of Midgard, god of warriors. He also has a belt of strength called
Mjegengirth,
and 2 gloves of iron that help him grip Mjolnir. He also has a chariot pulled by 2 goats, just because. Yeah. And I'm going to picture them always screaming like in Thor: Love and Thunder.
Yep.
Obviously, he also had. He's also the god of thunder
and the god of farmers. Interesting.
I mean, what he should be the god of all.
Well, he kind of became the chief god towards the latter end of the Viking era. It was originally Odin. It sort of more became Thor. But he wasn't the brightest.
No.
The god of wisdom.
He's kind of depicted that way in the Marvel movies, Thor not being the cleverest.
Yeah.
He kind of thinks with his hammer first.
Yes, very much. He's a hit first, ask questions later,
yeah.
But there's no one to ask questions to.
No.
Loki, however, is...
Tom Hiddleston.
Yes. He's, amongst other things, he's the god of mischief, chaos, fire and wisdom. He's a dangerous half-god, half-giant trickster, always wreaking havoc among the gods, but who also oddly helped them out quite a lot. Whenever something went wrong, it was usually Loki that helped to solve it.
So is Loki being half god? Obviously, it's said in the Marvel movies, but is he like part of Jotunheim as well? That is kind of within Norse myth.
He is actually a Jotun, but he's a Jotun sorcerer. He can shapeshift, and unlike in the Marvel things, he's apparently he is incredibly handsome in the Marvel things because he's Tom Hiddleston.
Oh yes,
but he's got flaming red hair.
Ooh, that's different. They went with black, which I think suits him.
It suits Tom Hiddleston. But he's disarmingly handsome.
Oh, okay.
Which makes his mischief and his chaos, like sometimes he's mischievous, sometimes he's dangerously mischievous. That's when it sidles into chaos. And he and Odin are blood brothers. So they make a pact which makes them actually stronger than actual brothers, because oaths to the Vikings were very, very important. As we said earlier, they're on honour-based culture. So him and Odin are like stronger than natural born brothers. They are blood brothers. They are sworn brothers. They made oaths, which is why Loki helps them out a lot, but which is why their betrayals at the end, because as much as it looks like Loki betrays Odin, Odin betrays Loki much more.
Yeah.
It makes it so much worse at the end.
Yeah. So Balder
is the son of Odin and
Frigg.
Yeah.
A beautiful and gracious god, beloved by all. But he's killed by Loki's trickery, which sets off Ragnarok, and he will be resurrected when the war is over to start a new world.
Yeah, he's the god of sun, and he's actually called Balder the Most Beautiful. He's like so shiningly beautiful you can't look upon him and not fall in love with him. He's amazing, he's perfect.
Nice.
Yeah. Frigg, who's the wife of Odin, she's a practitioner of magic. She's the goddess of the home and marriage and the mother of Balder. But not the mother of Thor.
Fair.
Yeah, it's kind of complicated. That's a weird family tree.
Yeah. So Freya. She's a feather-cloaked goddess of love and fertility, but also of war and death. They are very closely linked, that is why.
Yep.
She has a complicated history and might have started as someone else. She's also the goddess of cats and has a chariot drawn by cats. Why not? She's also the only person/people that Odin is scared of, and she even gets first pick of the slain on the battlefield before him.
Yeah. In some versions, some people call her his wife, but she's not. She's someone completely different from Frigg. But yeah, it's believed that there was another woman beforehand who was part of a trio of sisters who was a famous sorcerer, and she brought violence and gold and greed to the Norse, so they tried to kill her by burning her, and then she came back again. And they tried to kill her by burning her again, and then she came back as Freya.
Ah, okay.
So that's why Freya is sometimes called the thrice burned.
Ah, okay.
But she is the only one that does not take anyone's shit, and Odin is terrified of her.
Good.
Freyr is her brother. He's the god of farming, agriculture, fertility and prosperity, and he's a wind god, and he has a cool ship that can fold up and be put in his pocket.
That's fun.
And then he just takes it out and it's like a square of cloth, and he just flicks it and boom, there's this massive ship.
That's fun.
He's also got a golden bristled boar.
Why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
He'll have an animal of some description.
Yeah.
Now, Jorda. Is that right?
Jorda or Njord.
Okay. He's a powerful god of the sea and father of Freya and Freyr.
Yeah, they're twins.
They're Vanir, light elves. That's a long story. But he also apparently has the most beautiful feet in Asgard.
Which is part of the myth.
So if you've got a foot fetish, you're going to like Yoda or North.
Yep, him the guy. Anyone with a passing interest in Norse mythology is sure to have come across female figures that choose who makes it to Valhalla upon death. The Valkyries. They are Odin's female helping spirits, who are most often depicted as elegant maidens ferrying the slain to Valhalla, or Folkvanga, which is Freya's hall. Their more sinister side is often overlooked, even though their name means choosers of the slain. So they'd literally watch the battle, and they can sometimes intervene, depending on if Odin wants a specific side to win and it's not looking good for them. The Valkyries will intervene on their behalf, on their side. But the cool thing is Valhalla is the hall of the slain, so people that die in battle, and it's strictly people who die in battle.
Yeah.
Folkvanga, Freya's hall, there is a little bit of a difference there, because whereas in Valhalla every day they fight to the death and come back again, Folkvanga's a bit more peaceful, and also people that die in other battles, so women that die in childbirth, also people who die in battles with diseases, so cancer and mental health battles, depression, could potentially go to Folkvanga.
That's cool.
Yep. So just because you don't die in battle as a warrior, you might not get into Valhalla, but it doesn't mean you're not worthy of being chosen for a death as a warrior.
That's cool. I enjoy that.
Even if you're only fighting with yourself.
I'll be a Viking. They sound cool.
Yeah. The only death that you didn't want was what's called a straw death, which is like a death from old age or like weak sickness, like dysentery and things like that.
So you didn't want to die of old age, you needed to go out in a blaze of glory.
Exactly. Otherwise you'd go to Helheim and to hell.
Oh, Christ.
It's called the Corpse Hall. It's not cool, it's very dark and dingy and...
Not nice.
Yeah.
Cool, so that's the cool myths, but we can't not do a episode on Vikings and talk about some misconceptions.
Yeah, there are a lot of misconceptions.
Yes, there are. So the first one, Carrie, they were filthy and unkempt.
Archaeologists actually find evidence on a regular basis of combs, spoons, and other grooming utensils that indicate the Viking people were very keen on maintaining personal hygiene. Saxon men were threatened by them because the Saxon women were fascinated by how clean and well groomed they were. They were terrified, not because the Vikings were coming in to raid and everything, but because they were coming in to steal your girl. Sliding into her village DMs. Sorry.
Popular culture over-dramatises their weird.
Yes, it does. Though the Marvel comics and movies, through them, a new generation of people from around the world have been introduced to the Norse mythological figures like Thor, Loki, Odin and Surtur. The stories of Thor and his friends in the superhero universe are some of the most far out, but the actual mythology is even weirder. Loki, for example, depending on the retelling, is father to, amongst others, a giant wolf and a serpent that encircles the earth, in addition to being the mother to an 8-legged horse. And Thor once dressed up as a woman and got married. Yeah.
Fair enough. So actually the real life is weirder than the movies make out.
Yeah, truth is stranger than fiction.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
All Vikings are buried among a flaming boat.
You have probably heard at some point or another that a friend expresses that when they die, they would like to be buried like a Viking and set adrift in a flaming ship, floating gently out to sea.
You've said that.
I have. It would be cool. Although I don't want to be cremated.
No.
Vikings had a variety of funerary rituals that would differ depending on factors such as status in society, gender, age, and more. Viking ships were expensive and time-consuming to produce, and so it was not at all common practice to send corpses out to sea in flaming boats. More often, the Norse would either bury their dead in large burial mounds with the cash of their possessions, and rarely even with a ship to help ferry their spirit to the afterlife, or the corpses were cremated in funeral pyres.
They were barbarics.
Today, Vikings in our collective consciousness are best remembered for their raiding, and they most certainly did do a lot of raiding. But Vikings were ultimately much more interested in establishing new trading routes through their conquests, particularly as the Viking Age, 793 CE to 1066 CE, progressed. Viking raids often targeted monasteries because they were usually well stocked with supplies and valuable objects and not particularly well protected. The legal systems throughout the medieval Nordic world were sophisticated and complex, and several law codes contain the phrases, "With law shall the land be built." Even today, this is the motto of the Icelandic police force. In fact, the Alþingi, Iceland's national parliament, is one of the world's oldest parliamentary institutions, having been established in AD 930 at Thingvellir, or Assembly Plains. They actually have Thingvellir on the Isle of Man, and that's been going for over 1,000 years now. Each year at the Althingi, everyone would gather at Law Rock, and the appointed law speaker would recite the laws off by heart.
They blood-eagled their enemies.
I know it's horrible, but I do kind of think this punishment would actually be cool. It'd be terrifying, but it would be cool. The horrible thing that the Vikings were said to do to their victims, the blood eagle, where they would use a sharpened axe and they'd basically like shear away the skin, and then they'd slash the ribs and pull the ribs out, and then pull the lungs out backwards and spread them like a pair of eagle wings.
That's gross.
Yeah. Probably never happened. Or at least it's highly debatable. There are a few obscure references in Norse poetry to eagles being carved on people's backs, but since such verses are notoriously cryptid and convoluted, the original meaning may well have been less literal than how it was interpreted in later texts, and like translations that aren't always direct. In any case, the details got nastier, bloodier, and more fantastical with every passing century, like a gory game of Chinese whispers. I mean, it could be like they carved an image of an eagle in the back, or that they killed people and left them as food for the eagles, because apparently that was a cool thing to be called, like eagle feeder or raven feeder.
Wow.
You'd kill enough people that you'd feed the ravens.
That's fun. They used skulls as drinking vessels.
There is no evidence that Vikings drank out the skulls of vanquished enemies. This was a misconception based on a passage in the skaldic poem Krakumal, speaking of heroes drinking from or Juvidum Hausa, or the branches of skulls. Thank you. This was a reference to drinking horns, like horns as a branch out of a skull.
Mm-hmm.
It was mistranslated in the 17th century as referring to the skulls of the slain.
And lastly, Carrie, Vikings wore horned helmets.
No. Just no. Just no. Vikings traditionally went bareheaded, or they wore simple leather and metal-framed helmets with the occasional face guard. I mean, let's face it, if you had amazing hair like that, you would not put on a helmet. You'd just laureate all your way through the battlefield. The idea behind horned helmets came about from the Viking revival during Queen Victoria's reign. One of the main culprits for that are the people that put on Wagner's The Ring of the Nibelungs. So part of the Volsung saga. So you got these big women with your massive cone bra breastplates and your horned helmets.
And then the Rise of the Valkyries.
Can I just say something totally cool that I nerded out on?
What?
In the Loki series, in one of the last episodes where you got classic Loki with his old cool costume played wonderfully by Richard E. Grant, when he starts to construct the place in the background, you can hear a variation on the theme. It's called Classic Builds. You can hear a variation of Ride of the Valkyries playing in it.
That's
and
fun.
As soon as I heard it, I was like, oh my god, Wagner!
That's really cool. I mean, I just go to, the 1994 Casper the Friendly Ghost movie. When the ghosts come up.
Wow.
That shows us indifference!
There are two kinds of people. So, those are the misconceptions.
Yep.
Do you want to give us some fun facts?
Yes!
Okay.
With a question mark, because some of these aren't as fun as they seem.
But they're cool to know.
They are.
So, tell us about Vikings that were known as berserkers.
The berserkers were champion warriors who are reported to have fought in a trance-like fury. A state was likely to have been at least partly introduced by alcohol or drugs. But these warriors gave their name to the English word berserk. So basically they were ones that would just kind of stand on the sidelines going, oh, I'm going to kill, and then go, ah! And just go in. And I would hate to have someone running at me going, ah!
But they'd mostly be bare-chested or minimum armour.
Yeah.
They'd probably wear a wolf skin or a bear skin to try and get that spirit of the bear.
Yeah.
They'd be standing on the sidelines just slapping their face and going, and just punching each other. And then they just turn around, and you're
I would not. No, thank you. That's where we get the word berserk from.
Yep. Scary. So, what about skiing?
Well, they like to ski for fun. Roughly 6,000 years ago, the Scandinavian people developed their own version of skis and used them for hunting, travelling and entertainment. They even had a god of skiing whose name was Ulla. Kings and high lords indulged in skiing for entertainment and sometimes held competitions where the best skiers would win prizes.
Ulla was also the god of gaming and luck and gambling.
Nice.
So next time you want to roll a dice, ask for Ulla's help.
Ulla.
How did they start fires?
They used Wii.
Yay!
And considering our friend Matt tried to tell me that we were lying when we said that we starts fires, this is for you, Matthew!
Urine is flammable, Matt. We've told you this.
He doesn't believe us. Vikings lived a large part of their lives on the go. And because they didn't have lighters, obviously, they would collect a tree fungus called torchwood and boil it for several days in their own urine. After the mix was done, they would pound it into like a felt-like substance, and the sodium nitrate found in the urine would mix with the touchwood, making the texture easily combustible, so they could easily start a fire while on the road.
Bit smelly, but
It would be
effective.
gross, but yeah.
That's why if someone says, I wouldn't pee on you if you're on fire. No, do it. Do it. If you don't like them, do it.
Hum.
Going back to the grooming thing.
Yes.
What did Viking men do to their hair?
They dyed it quite often. During the Viking era, having blonde hair was really in with the cool crowd. Therefore, brunette Vikings, mostly men, would use a heavily concentrated soap with high levels of that would bleach their hair. Historians believe that aside from being part of their culture's beauty ideal, the bleached hair would also keep lice away.
Which led to their whole, being nicely groomed things.
Yep.
And what sort of legacy did they leave in England?
They left their stamp on a lot of our English place names. If you're in a village, town or city that has a name ending in by, Thorpe or A, then it was likely settled by the Vikings, like Wetherby.
Kirkby? What other legacy did they leave?
They left the days of the week, because most of them are named after Viking gods. The great raven god Odin, otherwise known as Woden, gave us Wednesday, literally Woden's Day.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Thursday and Friday are named after Thor and Frigg, the god and goddess of war and marriage, respectively. Finally, and possibly most famously, the Norse god of thunder and strength, Thor, gave us our Thursday. Saturday, before it was given the name of the Roman god Saturn, was originally Loki's Day, so you should never make a deal on a Saturday.
If April the 1st falls on a Saturday, mischief. So that's within our days of the week. What about with our language?
Well, they left us quite a few popular words. And several of those we still use today, and they have Viking origins. Snort, lump, scrawny, and anger all have their roots in Old Norse language. So does axe, raft, plough. My brain was like, what does that say? Window, bylaw, Norman, and ransack. Hell is also derived from Norse, referring to the goddess, Hel, who ruled over the dead. Husband and heathen are also examples of Norse words inherited by modern English. They also gave us the concept of sarcasm, which we are grateful for. Especially in England, we are so sarcastic. I am so sarcastic all the time.
We took that sarcasm and we ran with it.
We did.
There's also nag and leg.
Nag leg.
Sorry, horrible histories. And what did they do to the less fortunate members of their society, like sick children?
Abandoned them, mate. Didn't need them. Vikings were all about physical strength and were known to abandon sickly children. Abandonment methods would include leaving them alone in the wilderness and throwing them into the sea.
There was also a thing called the etterstup, which is kind of... There's not a whole lot of evidence that it did happen, but there are also some references that it may have happened, where particularly elderly or sick older members of society would go to a waterfall or a nearby cliff and just throw themselves off it to stop being a burden to society. It was an honourable thing to do. It's called the etterstup. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a bit dramatic, but...
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. So that's the Vikings. What doth we think?
I mean, I love them. I find them a
Did
fascinating
I get anything
culture.
wrong?
No. Not that I could see.
Did I miss out anything massive?
Again, no. There's a whole lot that you could go into.
There's so much, and this was already verging on like over an hour's worth of stuff.
Yeah. It's crazy, and the thing is, most people think of them as just like violent raiders, but there's so much more to them. They have such a rich culture, and it's one of those things. The more I read, the more I learn, and I find them fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't realise how much of an impact they've had on our modern culture until you start to look into it, and you're like, ah.
And I'm gonna bring up horrible histories.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be shocked. We do it a lot. There's 2 songs about Vikings in horrible histories, and they could not be more different.
Mm-hmm.
If you listen to Literally from the first season,
which is like a heavy
arguably
metal.
one of the best songs.
Oh, great.
Heavy metal songs about all the bad things
Yeah.
that Vikings do.
Yep.
And then you listen to Viking Land,
which is like
which is in like season 5. Yeah, where they're singing about all the good that Vikings did.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to listen to all of our podcasts, well, if you've gotten to this point, you have, so thank you.
Hi.
But I would suggest listening to both of those songs. They're only a couple of minutes long, but they basically sum up Vikings.
Yeah,
in 2 different songs.
Yeah, they're very bipolar, but wonderful. But yeah, they have such a rich history, and I would recommend to anyone who's interested in the myths, probably don't go straight in with the Eddas, because they can be heavy reading just because they're translated from old languages. Neil Gaiman, the author, he wrote a book basically based on the Eddas called Norse Myth, and it's his retelling of the Norse mythology, and he brings the characters to life in a modern sense, and they're wonderful. It's very, very well done, and he's done a series called American Gods, which is basically all the old gods are real and are fighting with the new gods in America.
That's really cool.
You should watch the series. It's got Ricky Whittle.
But you also watch Viking, don't you?
I do watch Vikings, and I'm now watching Viking Valhalla, and there are a lot of historical liberties, so many historical liberties, but the show is just great fun. And the guy Alex Ho Anderson, who plays Ivor the Boneless, oh my god, he's a beautiful psychopath. He plays it so demented but so good. And special shout out to Gustav Skarsgård as Floki, who is like my favourite character.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's brilliant. But it is a good series, and there's a lot of beautiful landscapes and everything there. And there are some good references to the culture, and you realise how fantastical and wonderful the mythology is.
Yeah.
It's just take some of it historically with a pinch of salt, because it's not entirely true.
No.
But then again, a lot of it is legend, and you're not entirely sure what is true and what isn't.
Fact.
Speaking of legends...
Yes.
Ridiculous Death!
This week's Ridiculous Death is someone we spoke about already in this podcast.
Beautiful.
Thank you. So it's not someone completely different this time. I mean, we're going to speak about a very specific Viking. Now, there are a lot of famous Vikings. Like, we've done an episode on Ivor the Boneless, and we then had Sigurd the Mighty as a previous Ridiculous Death. You can hear about both of those if you listen to our episode. Here's a plug.
I have a story to tell.
So give that a listen. There's another Viking one. But yeah, anyway, so he would be the obvious Ridiculous Death to go for, but we've used him. And I don't like to regurgitate Ridiculous Deaths, because there's actually still quite a lot of people who kill themselves stupidly. Yep. But this isn't... The manner of this person's death isn't what's ridiculous, really. It's more the manner of it, I guess.
Yeah, it's not what they did, it's just how it happened.
Yeah. So, Ragnar Lothbrok, which we spoke about before.
Yeah.
He is said to have been the father of 3 sons. Halfdan, Inwa, who was Ivor the Boneless, and Hua, or
Uber,
who, according to Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and other medieval sources, led a Viking invasion of East Anglia, here in Lynn, in 865. They may have sought to avenge Ragnar's death, which may or may not have been a murder, or they may have been claiming land to which they believed had the right as a result of a previous invasion by Ragnar that may or may not have actually happened. This sort of ambiguity pervades much that is thought to be known about Ragnar, and it has its roots in European literature after his death.
Yeah. I mean, it's... As you said before, he could have been a number of different people.
Yeah.
And there's some cool bits, like, about how he is... like, people he's met, and like being Ivor and Uber and Halfdan's father and everything that could be legitimate.
Yeah.
But he got his name Lothbrok, meaning shaggy pants or hairy pants, because he apparently fought a dragon to win a princess. And dragons in Norse mythology are kind of either like the fire-breathing dragons, or they're just giant worms that spit poison. And this one spit poison. So what he did was he made himself like really, really hairy pants made out of animal fur. And depending on which story you believe, either he coated them in tar and let it harden, or he walked straight into freezing cold water and let them freeze so they were solid, so that when the serpent bit his legs, it couldn't get through, and allowed him access to hack the creature's head off.
That's fun.
Yeah, so Lothbrok means shaggy or hairy pants. So he's Ragnar Shaggy Pants.
That's nice.
You're welcome.
So, what makes his death so ridiculous is because he was captured by an Anglo-Saxon king, Alla of Northumberland. Now, he wasn't a particularly great king. He's not really known to have done anything or achieved greatness other than capture the most legendary Viking leader and put him to death by throwing him into a pit of snakes. This huge, larger-than-life Viking, almost a god,
Dragon killer,
was thrown into a pit of snakes by a weedy Englishman.
It's like such an anticlimactic end.
Isn't it? Like, you'd expect him to die in some great... And not only... I don't know, if he'd been thrown into a pit of snakes by, like, a hench as fuck Englishman. Yeah. But it's like, this teeny little...
Little King Ella.
Little weedy king was just like, yeet.
He probably didn't even throw him in himself. He got other people to throw him in. He's like, do it for me.
Yeah.
For me. But it's okay, because according to legend, Ivor the Boneless came over and blood-eagled him. As revenge.
Yep. Which we'll speak about if you listen to our episode. But yeah, so that's this week's ridiculous death, because he died. This amazing, hefty person was thwarted by a weedy Englishman.
Yeah. Bit shameful, really.
Isn't it, though?
Sorry, Ragnar.
Would he have gone to Valhalla?
Ooh, actually, that's a trick question. I mean, potentially if he fought against any of the snakes, maybe. But, I don't know.
Maybe. Fought against the snake?
You could punch it in the face.
Yeah, but he failed.
The thing is, right, we're in England, aren't we?
We are.
The only poisonous snakes we have in England are the asp and the adder. They're not particularly venomous.
No.
I mean, it would hurt. It would take a while. He would basically be bitten several times over.
Yep.
And it would be a painful and slow death.
Yep. That ain't no Valhalla shit right there.
No. If it was somewhere like America or
Australia.
even Africa or Australia with like your black mambas and things, or your cobras, then gone. Or a rattlesnake, gone. With England, it'd be like, nibble, 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 slow death.
And he still died.
Yeah. The great, larger-than-life worm killer, Ragnar Lothbrok, bitten to death slowly by an asp.
See? It's ridiculous.
It is. Right.
Sorry for this. It's quite a long one compared to what we usually do, but I tried my best.
To be fair, you did very, very well to condense it as much as you did.
Thank you. And I now know a lot more about Vikings, and I hope you do too. As in, people listening, not you. You know more than this.
I know more than I have any right to know. I don't know why I know.
You know more than you need to.
Yep.
No one needs to know that much about Vikings.
No. Unless you actually are one, but even then, I don't know.
Are you got any Viking in you?
According to my DNA test, yes, I do. I have ancestry from, shock horror looking at me, and anyone who's seen any of the pictures of us, I'm blonde-haired, blue-eyed, tall with wide shoulders. I have Norwegian and Swedish and Danish blood in me, as well as Scottish, English, Irish and Welsh.
Cool.
I couldn't be more Northern Europe if I tried.
Mm-hmm. I have a 2% Norwegian in me.
Nice. You're a Viking too.
Well,
to be fair, you're from East Anglia. Like, they settled.
They did.
Yeah.
They settled here and then down in Cornwall, which is why we've got similar accents.
One of your ancestors probably looked at one of these Vikings coming in with his blonde hair and just swishing it off the boat and just went, that one.
I'm brown hair and brown eyed.
Yeah, so maybe you didn't use the lime to dye yourself.
Maybe I did not.
No.
Did not. But yeah, that was this week's episode. If you want us to talk about anything specific, get in touch with us on any of our social medias. We've got Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at Cup of Histortea. But we also have TikTok.
Woo!
There's not mass on TikTok at the moment. We're just trying to build our followers and put up some interesting videos. We've got a lot of ideas with them to do. So follow us on TikTok at A Cup of Histortea.
And until next time, thank you for listening.
Bye!